Jason Voorhees' story begins in 1946, when he was born to Pamela Voorhees in the small town of Crystal Lake. From the moment he came into the world, Jason's life was marked by tragedy. He was born with severe physical deformities that made him stand out, and not in a good way. His large, misshapen head and facial features meant he was treated cruelly by others, even as a child, and no one felt this injustice more deeply than his mother. Pamela Voorhees wasn't just any mother. She was fiercely protective of Jason, more than most could ever understand. And who could blame her? In a world that shunned her son, she was his only source of comfort, love, and safety. She sheltered him from the cruel stares, the mocking voices, and the unkindness of the outside world. But even a mother's love can't shield a child from everything. When Jason was still a young boy, Pamela took a job as a cook at Camp Crystal Lake. And that's where everything changed. Camp Crystal Lake was supposed to be a place of fun and adventure, but it turned into Jason's nightmare. The counselors at the camp weren't exactly diligent about their jobs, especially when it came to watching over Jason. One day, while the counselors were too busy with their own distractions, Jason wandered too close to the lake. And here's the thing. Jason didn't know how to swim. While the other kids at camp splashed around, Jason found himself in the deep end, literally. He was thrown into the water by a group of kids who thought it'd be funny. But as he struggled to stay afloat, panic set in. The counselors didn't notice, and Jason went under, swallowed by the murky waters of Crystal Lake. He was only a child, terrified and alone, as the water dragged him down. Jason drowned that day, or at least that's what everyone thought. The camp was shut down after Jason's death, and Pamela Voorhees, heartbroken, devastated, was left alone. She blamed the camp counselors for her son's death, and she wasn't wrong. Their negligence had cost Jason his life. But for Pamela, losing her son wasn't something she could ever recover from. It broke her, twisted her mind, and pushed her into a dark place from which she would never return. Years later, when Camp Crystal Lake attempted to reopen, Pamela Voorhees decided to take matters into her own hands. She wasn't going to let this place ruin more lives. At least that's what she told herself. The truth was, she was out for revenge. Revenge for Jason. One by one, she hunted down the new counselors, taking their lives in the most brutal ways imaginable. She didn't care who they were. To her, they were all guilty. They all had to pay for what had happened to her son. But her bloody rampage came to an end when the last counselor, a young woman named Alice, managed to fight back. In a final confrontation, Alice killed Pamela Voorhees by decapitating her with a machete. Pamela's severed head rolled to the ground, and with it, the nightmare seemed to end. Except it didn't. Here's where things get weird. You'd think that with Pamela Voorhees dead, the tragedy of Crystal Lake would finally be over. But Jason, yes, Jason, was still out there. How, you ask? Well, the truth is no one really knows. Some say he never actually drowned that day. Others believe that Jason came back from the dead, driven by some supernatural force that wouldn't let him rest. Either way, Jason was alive. Or at least, something like Jason was alive. Years had passed since the day he supposedly drowned, but Jason had survived in the woods, lurking in the shadows near Crystal Lake. He had seen his mother die. He had seen her murdered by the very people she had sought to punish. And now, Jason took up her cause. He was going to finish what she started. The first person to encounter Jason was none other than Alice, the girl who had killed his mother. In an ironic twist of fate, Alice became Jason's first victim. He hunted her down, stalking her like prey, and when the moment was right, he struck. Alice never stood a chance. Jason quickly established himself as the new terror of Crystal Lake. He wasn't just any killer, he was relentless, unstoppable, and terrifying. Unlike his mother, who had used knives and other weapons to dispatch her victims, Jason preferred something a bit more personal. He picked up a machete, a weapon that would become synonymous with his name. But Jason wasn't just a brute force. He was methodical in his hunting, silent and stealthy. People who ventured too close to Crystal Lake found themselves caught in his deadly game. It didn't matter if they were campers, hikers, or just curious passers-by. If you entered Jason's territory, you were marked for death. Over the years, Jason's legend grew. But it wasn't until he found his iconic hockey mask that he truly became the figure of nightmares. The mask was a simple one, taken from one of his victims, but it transformed Jason into something more than just a man. It made him a symbol of fear, of death, of the inevitable. Jason's body count continued to rise, but so did the efforts to stop him. Time and time again, people would try to kill him, only for Jason to rise once more. He was stabbed, shot, drowned. Nothing worked. He was like death itself, impossible to escape, impossible to kill. At some point, Jason's story took a turn from merely tragic to downright supernatural. It became clear that he wasn't just a man anymore. Whether it was because of the curse of Crystal Lake or something darker, Jason was now something far beyond human. He had become a monster, one that couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be stopped, and definitely couldn't be killed. But despite all of that, Jason wasn't mindless. He had one driving motivation, one goal that fueled his every move: protecting his mother's memory. In Jason's twisted mind, he was still that scared little boy, lost and drowning, and every person who wandered into his domain was just another counselor who had let him die. Every kill was, in some sick way, revenge for the life that had been stolen from him. And then, something even stranger happened. At one point, Jason actually died. For real this time. They buried him, stuck him in the ground, and that seemed to be the end of it. But as we've already learned, death isn't much of an obstacle for Jason Voorhees. In one of the most bizarre twists of his story, a lightning strike, yes, a lightning strike, brought him back to life. That's right, Jason was resurrected by Mother Nature herself, like some kind of horrifying Frankenstein's monster. And from that point on, Jason was even more unstoppable than before. He wasn't just a man back from the dead. He was practically a walking corpse, stronger and more dangerous than ever. His already superhuman strength was amplified, and now, nothing short of complete annihilation could hope to stop him. Jason's rampages continued, year after year, always centered around Crystal Lake. No matter how many times they tried to stop him, whether it was trapping him, burning him, or even freezing him, Jason just kept coming back. And the more people tried to understand him, the less sense it all made. Some said he was a ghost, others claimed he was possessed. But the truth was simple. Jason Voorhees was death incarnate. He didn't need a reason to kill, he just did. Despite his monstrous nature, there was something almost pitiable about Jason. He wasn't evil in the traditional sense. He wasn't out to take over the world or conquer the living. He just wanted to be left alone. But as long as people kept coming to Crystal Lake, Jason would never rest. Each time someone disturbed his territory, it reignited the rage inside him, the rage that had been there since the day he drowned. And so, Jason's legend grew. He became more than just a local ghost story. He became a pop culture phenomenon. His hockey mask became an icon, recognizable to anyone who even remotely enjoyed horror. But for all his fame, Jason himself remained as much of a mystery as ever. He never spoke, never explained his actions. He simply was. Today, Jason Voorhees is still out there, or at least that's what the stories say. Some claim to have seen him lurking in the woods, waiting for the next unlucky soul to cross into his territory. Others say that Crystal Lake is cursed, forever haunted by the spirit of the boy who never grew up, never learned to swim, and never truly died. Jason's story is one of tragedy, revenge, and pure, relentless terror. From the moment he was born, he was destined to become something more than just a victim. He became the embodiment of fear itself, a reminder that sometimes the worst monsters are the ones we create. Jason Voorhees' story doesn't just stop at relentless killing or tragic beginnings. It's a tale that stretches beyond the grave and into the very fabric of horror legend. Jason wasn't just the monster under the bed or the boogeyman lurking in the shadows. He became something much more primal, a symbol, a force, a myth that no matter how hard you try, you can never truly escape. And the reason behind it? Jason never asked for any of this. He didn't choose to be the terror of Crystal Lake. He didn't even ask to be born into such a cruel world. Yet somehow, his name became synonymous with death itself. But let's take a step back for a second. What makes Jason Voorhees so unique? Sure, plenty of other killers, monsters, and supernatural creatures have terrorized people in the movies and beyond. But Jason stands out for one simple reason. He's pure, undiluted persistence. No matter how many times he's been shot, stabbed, set on fire, drowned again, electrocuted, or literally exploded, he just doesn't quit. It's almost admirable in a bizarre, horrifying way. And as long as the legend of Crystal Lake lives on, so too will the legend of Jason Voorhees. Because some stories don't end. They just keep coming back, like Jason.